Hello, RDs and RDs to be. Welcome to the RD Exam Ready podcast. I'm Zach Caseberg, your tutor, coach, and guide along the path to passing the RD exam. My biggest passion is to help people just like you to learn more about the exam, how to pass it, and just being a dietitian overall. If that sounds like you, then hey, you're in the right place. Now, you all know that I tend to really lean towards the dramatic at times when it comes to exam topics. There's been times where there's been an exam topic that I ran into and I said, should I just reconsider my whole job and career field? Maybe I should just think about something else. Luckily, I did not do that. I still persisted and stayed going forward. And research was really one of those topics that was a difficult one for me. Research and statistics, which is really within that domain one, can be a tough one for students, mostly because you're not overly motivated to study this topic. A lot of us don't have a big passion for research. Less students are doing a thesis, less people are doing dissertations, pursuing doctoral degrees. So we're seeing less and less research being actually brought up from scratch here. So it makes it difficult and it puts us all in this natural deficit here. And I think that although many of us aren't actively engaged in research, the thing is that it's no excuse. You still need to use research as a dietitian. It's not going anywhere. So it does make sense to me as to why we need to know it for exam day. And learning research is really can be an easy process if you work with me on this to do so. I'm going to give you tips, tricks, ways to remember your research topics here. We're going to start simple and recommend that you find some nice relevant examples to use as we go through each of these different types of research studies. That's what we're going to work on today is just types of research and research studies. It can be its own show, its own podcast, just talking about these different topics. But the reason I wanted to focus just on these is because a lot of these types of research, they all have very similar names, they sound the same, they have similarities themselves. So here's my tip. If you can connect some examples of any kind in your mind with each of these different types of research studies, it's going to help you differentiate them, especially ones that are most similar. By having a backup example, you're going to be able to sort through those on exam day, no problem at all. To begin, there's two different types of research you need to be familiar with. Do you know it? That will be your descriptive research and your analytical research. There's going to be multiple other types of research that fall under each of these categories, but let's just talk through descriptive and analytical right now. Descriptive research is meant to tell you what happened, and analytical research is meant to tell you why it happened. The main way that you should differentiate the two is by knowing that analytical research can show cause and effect of data, cause and effect relationship between variables, but descriptive data cannot show cause and effect. And I usually say that analytical research is a bit more serious than descriptive research because it can show that cause and effect. In descriptive research, your main goal is to collect data and see what happens without manipulating or controlling much. Some examples of descriptive research would be like qualitative research, a survey that you send out to participants, even something like a case report, a case study, or a major case study that you might have done for your internship is an example of descriptive research. A little bit on the more analytical research would be more like randomized time, randomized controlled trials, or time series, quasi experimental, cohort, cross sectional, all these in here. We're going to break down each of these categories and talk about each different type of research that falls under them. This is where I'm going to want you to grab some relevant examples to help take into your exam day. Starting with descriptive research. Qualitative research is a form of descriptive research. It often precedes other studies. As it is qualitative, you need to know that it's qualitative and not quantitative. How are those different? Qualitative does not have concerns for numerical data. Quantitative does. Qualitative research is meant to explore a phenomenon, but instead of collecting data through interviews, observations, so you're basically getting your data through just seeing what happens through qualitative research. Could be an interview you did, could be a questionnaire, could have been a focus group of different people that you interviewed, and you're getting their opinions on maybe a product or a food or a restaurant. These are all examples of qualitative research. So, when you think of qualitative research, think of like a focus group for a nutrition supplement. That's your example of qualitative research. And with qualitative research, with that, you're looking at a focus group of different demographics that you imagine. Think about a funny group, right? I always think of a funny group and a focus group. It tends to draw the funniest type of people to it. So think about a really funny group of people that are giving really funny opinions in qualitative research. A case report in a case study or a case series is when you're going to complete a report on a single subject or more than one subject. What you're doing in a case report or a case series is you're going to have multiple people with the same disease, same condition, and same characteristics. And what you're doing is you're just putting together a report based on the observations that you've had when working with the patient or treating the patient. This could help outline the disease state and give you some ideas about what the risks and indicators, and later it can help you to maybe develop some analytical research. So let's say when you do a case series, I want you to think of your relevant example of if you did a major case study in your clinical rotation. For my major case study, I remember having a patient, let's just say their initials were RB, okay? And this patient had oral pharyngeal cancer with a tube feed associated with a PEG. And I went through all of the cases of treating that patient. That's what a case series was. I was involved with treating the patient and going through their whole disease state, but I didn't do a whole study based on them, right? I didn't put them in a case group, an intervention group. I didn't do that. I'm just giving a report based on that patient. So for a case series, think about your major case study if you had one, or come up with one of your favorite patient examples to think of. The next type of descriptive research I want to talk about is a survey. A survey is something that I know you're familiar with, but keep in mind when we say a survey, we're thinking like a designed survey. It has like a defined population, defined time frame, defined data. So it's not like a general questionnaire. It's meant to be something more descriptive in that manner. I always think back to my thesis survey, or I think a survey that I did in college when I wanted a little extra money. And that's what I always think of when I think of a survey. It's just a really specific type of survey that asked about my demographics, my opinions on politics, how many beverages or fruits that I eat in a day. This is what my survey was that I would think of. And that's exactly what a survey would be for descriptive research. The last one here is going to be a correlation, aka an ecological study. A correlation study is meant to look at a correlation or the relationship between two variables. An example of this could be looking at the relationship between cardiovascular exercise and lung cancer incidence. That is the only thing that a correlational study is trying to tell you is if there is a relationship between those two variables. Because it is descriptive research, you're not able to make a cause and effect judgment based on the data that you got from a correlation study. It can only be used to say, hey, I compared these two variables. Here's what happened. Here was the correlation or the relationship between the two. You couldn't then say, hey, we need to develop more cancer drugs based on this, right? Or whatever it may be. Okay, now we've wrapped up descriptive. We're done with that. Let's get serious, as I would say, and let's talk analytical research. Now, in analytical research, of course, you're trying to test a hypothesis. You're trying to find a cause and effect of the data that you're analyzing. And we're trying to make sure we're running really good quality studies here. So now I want you to think of serious research and think of what serious research studies look like. I want to talk a bit about the experimental model. It's the first one we're going to mention here. The experimental model, which is like a randomized controlled trial, we're going to use those kind of synonymous here, is where you're going to do a study where we're randomizing people into a treatment group or a control group, right? They're randomized so that the participants themselves don't know which group they're falling in. And better yet, if the researchers don't know which group they're going to fall into, that's very good. Okay. This was different than descriptive research. We did not do this in descriptive research. So, in this experimental model or the randomized controlled trial, we're making sure that the treatment group gets the treatment. The control group is largely going to receive some form of a placebo treatment. And then you would go through the steps of analyzing that data to compare the two groups. That could be a t-test, an ANOVA test, or some type of statistical analysis that you would use to say if there is an actual cause and effect or a causal relationship between these two differences in groups. Hopefully that makes sense there. Now, there's a second type of study also I want to be familiar with when it comes to analytical research, and that's a quasi experimental design. It sounds odd, but quasi experimental is when we're going to maybe not be able to randomly assign participants into separate groups. This may seem kind of confusing, but let's keep just the relevant information we need. In a quasi experimental study, you're going to take a pre test and a post test evaluation. And my favorite example I have of this is, let's say we're implementing a new management program at a or a company. So we're going to take a pre test measurement of all of our salespeople, perhaps, or all of our employees to say, here's where your performance is now. Then we're going to implement our treatment or our training program and then take post test evaluations to compare those to see, hey, did the program influence, did the program help the production of our staff members? And that's what a quasi experimental is a good example of, is when we're actually trying to make cause and effect inferences based on this program that we implemented. Only difference was we weren't really randomizing them into two groups. We didn't do one group that got the training program and one group that didn't get the training program. We're still able to make cause and effect, but we're not randomizing them into two groups or giving them a treatment and a control. It's just kind of, seeing how do they perform in this way. Now, our third type of analytical research is going to be a cohort study. And I want you to know that a cohort is a group. It's a group of people who have something in common. For instance, the group that you graduated with from your dietetic internship or grad school, that's your cohort, okay? That's your cohort. So in a cohort study, you're taking that group or that cohort that shares similar characteristics, and you're going to usually follow them in time. If I follow them forwards in time to see maybe who ends up getting disease and who doesn't, that would be called a prospective study when I'm taking them now and looking forward in time. If I had a cohort, such as a group of people that are all 40 years old with different disease states, right? I could also do a retrospective study with it, which is looking backwards at time to see, well, what led up to this case. So maybe my example of a retrospective study for that could be, let's say, my favorite one is just, hey, I have a group of men who all have lung cancer. And then they all have lung cancer, all of the same type of cancer. And then my cohort retrospective study would be taking them, looking backwards at time to see, well, what happened. Whereas prospective version of that is like, I have a healthy group of people right now, and I'm going to look forward in time to see who develops cancer or whatever disease I'm looking at. Hopefully that makes sense here. Now, one that I think does make sense is a case controlled group. And I love these here too. A case controlled group means you're going to have one case group and one control group. Okay. So in a case group, I have the people with the disease. My control group is the people without the disease. And what I do is I'm then going to look retrospectively to compare what the lifestyle factors were of the case group compared to the control group. I'm going to come back to cancer here. Sorry to be a little daunting, but let's say I work at a health center and I have a group of men, all 40, okay, and half of them have lung cancer, half of them do not have lung cancer. So I have my case group with lung cancer and control without. What I would be doing in a case control study is then looking backwards at time, retrospectively, to say, all right, what did the case group do that's different than the control group? Maybe the case group are all lifetime smokers. Maybe they were exposed to Agent Orange in Vietnam. Maybe they were coal miners. You see the types of things I'm looking at to compare to the control group. So when you see a case control, think of this lung cancer example and just think case group with disease, control group without disease. Almost done with these here. Our next one is going to be a prevalence, aka a cross-sectional study. With a cross-sectional study, I want you to think of a cross right there in the middle. A cross-sectional study is when we're measuring the exposure and the outcome at the exact same time. It's known as a snapshot in time, where we're looking just to see what's currently happening. For instance, I could do a cross sectional study right now and say how many people have HIV in my community. That's what I would be doing. I'm not looking forwards or backwards in time. I'm measuring right now how many people have HIV in my community. That would be an example of a cross sectional study where I'm measuring outcome and exposure at the same time and just giving an analysis of what currently is going on in my community. The last point I want to make, just as we finish these up, is just be very careful with those final types of research studies that we just went through, especially the ones like cohort, case control, cross sectional. They all start with a C and they all have some similarities. So be very careful, especially on exam day. We're going to do some questions here soon that hopefully help you with that. Just make sure you understand again for case control, you're going to have a case group with disease, control group without the disease. Then, as we get into a cross sectional study, you're going to be having the outcome and exposure at the same time, just looking at not two groups, just one group of people. And then for a cohort study, that would be a group of people that we're going to follow either forwards or backwards in time. So make sure you just have those down and don't get those mixed up in your head. It's going to greatly help you on exam day here. Now, you think you have your statistics and research down? Let's see if you know your types of research studies by applying them to three great practice questions here. Number one, the smoking habits of 82 men with lung cancer were compared with the smoking habits of a control group of 400 men with other diseases. This study design is known as blank. A, a cross sectional study. B, a cohort study. C, a quasi experimental study. Or D, a case control study. The smoking habits of 82 men with lung cancer were compared with the smoking habits of a control group of 400 men with other diseases. This study design is known as a what? Very good. So I'm going to use process of elimination. A, B, C, and D goes on my whiteboard. And as I go through each answer, I'm going to eliminate the ones that I think are a bad fit. This is going to put me in the best position to choose the correct answer once I find it. Starting with a cross-sectional study. In a cross-sectional study, I'm measuring outcome and exposure at the exact same time, looking at one point in time, not really following anyone, forwards or backwards in time. In this question, when it's asking about men with lung cancer and those without, I don't think this is talking about a cross sectional study. It reminds me of something different, but not a cross sectional. I'm going to rule out A for right now because it talks nothing about a snapshot in time. B, cohort study would be one single group that I'm following either forwards or backwards in time. Although this question doesn't seem like we're talking about one group of people, it seems like we're talking about several groups of people. That doesn't sound like a cohort study to me, and I would rule out B because of that. For C, quasi experimental study, similar to the example I came up with, which were implementing a treatment program or some type of productivity program in a workplace, We take a group of people, we're taking before and after measurements. Those were the big key points. None of that is mentioned in this question, and it would make me rule out answer C. And D, a case control study. Case control is where I have a case group, a control group, and I'm comparing their differences. This seems to fit very well with number one because I have our case group with lung cancer, control group without lung cancer, or just having other diseases. And we're going to look at that, and my best answer would be D, a case control study. Number two, a study in which a researcher completes a report about their observations and inferences based on treating four patients with the same condition is known as blank. Okay, a study in which a researcher completes a report about their observation and inferences based on treating four patients with the same condition is known as what? A cohort study. B, a case control study. C, case series study. Or D, a survey. Same method, process of elimination. For a cohort study would be a group of people following forwards and backwards in time. It does not seem. We do have a group of people that they're talking about, four people with the same condition. So actually, I'm just going to put a little question mark by A for right now. B, a case control study. This doesn't seem like a case control study. We just did a question on this. Case control would be one group with the disease, one group without, and that's not what we're discussing right here. I would rule out answer B because of this. C, a case series study. Well, a case series is when I have one subject or several subjects with a disease, and I'm making a report or some type of analysis based on treating them for that. This might be a good fit for my question, and I want to hold on to it. D, a survey. Well, a survey is, again, a predefined survey would involve predefined population, time frame, questions, and data. Doesn't sound like this question's asking about a survey, and I'm going to rule that out. So right now I had a question mark on A, a cohort study, or I felt better about C, a case series study. My best answer here would be answer C, a case series study. And this is an example if we have a group of people or if we have four people or so who are just making a report based on treating them for the disease, we're not really doing much influence or doing a whole study based on it. That would be a case series study where we're just kind of giving a report based on treating the patient. All right. Number three, a cohort study would require the researchers to group individuals based on similar characteristics and let's see what our answer is. A, measure only their current disease state. B, follow them forward in time to observe their incidence of disease. C, collect only qualitative data on the subjects. Or D, describe the relationship between two variables without cause and effect. A cohort study would require the researchers to group individuals based on similar characteristics and blank. All right, let's do process of elimination to help us get through these answers. For A, measure only their current diseases. This felt fishy to me just because in a cohort study, it seems like we're either taking them forwards or backwards in time. It doesn't seem like we're only measuring them at one point in time, like a cross-sectional. So I would rule out answer A because of that. I don't think that's a good fit for a cohort. B, following them forward in time to observe their incidence of disease. I like this as an answer for a cohort study. It's one of the possible outcomes of what we can do with it. C, collect only qualitative data on the subjects. I don't think that only qualitative data would have to be collected on the subjects. I think we could collect other data as well. So I'm going to rule out answer C. And D, describe the relationship between two variables without cause and effect. Relationship between two variables really makes me think of a correlation study instead of a cohort study. So I would say that for a cohort study, our best answer would be answer B, following them forward in time to observe their incidence of disease. That's a wrap for today's lesson, students. I hope you watched, listened, learned, and enjoyed the show. Remember, passing this exam is a journey. We all need assistance along the way. The only thing that I want to do is always just offer as much help as I can to get as many people to pass this exam as possible. So if you care about that too and want to see others succeed, do me a favor, hit the subscribe button if you haven't, tell other studying students, rate, review, help spread the word. Check out RD Exam Ready on socials, and remember, as always, happy studying RD to be.